If you ever study out depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, psychosis, and look at the symptoms that come with all of these, you'll always find gastrointestinal symptoms of some sort. Always. In every disorder.
Yeah.
It's always there.
Without fail.
Without fail. You never have the mental disorder without the gut disorder. They always go together. There's always both happening at the same time.
Do you think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the brain itself?
There's, if injury, possibly, the injury could be a factor. There's also, there's birth defects. That's another possibility,
But they would be known. Like
they
you would
would be
know
very,
if you had a birth defect, right?
That wouldn't be something that would develop when you're 20.
Yeah. So you would know that from day one.
Find that very early on. Exactly. There would be a.
Well, I would suppose that 95% plus of the people watching, or that know someone that's going through that, the majority of cases, they don't have a traumatic brain injury. There's obviously those circumstances, but a lot of the time, the people experiencing chronic levels of mental illness due to things that there's no causative factor that they know of.
Right. Didn't have blunt head trauma.
Yeah.
Didn't, people that are developing these things in adulthood, it's not genetic.
Yeah.
It was, the genetics may be triggered, and activated, but it wasn't a genetic disease. This was something that developed. And if they had the right, the right triggers in their genes for this to develop quickly, then you develop sooner than later.
Yeah.
But your, schizophrenia, psychosis, anxiety, depression, all of them have a gut component to them. If they have a gut disorder component to them, they're going to have a nutritional deficiency of some sort.
To me, science is the real need behind what's going on. Why are these things changing? Why am I having these issues? It has to do with how do you make the neurotransmitters that cause you to be happy in the first place? Or what's not working to drive my anxiety up? Or why am I not calming down enough to go to sleep? So my own personal journey in dealing with my own family, I have 4 beautiful children, an amazing wife. And when I was 40 years old, I was struggling with serious fatigue, chronic fatigue, in fact, pain, anxiety, issues of losing everything in my life. I lost everything, even my cars, back in the crash in 2008. And today I've turned around and overcome all these chronic illnesses to be able to help other people do the same thing today. In my practice today, I see many people suffering with anxiety, depression, and insomnia. Like most of it has to go back to gut health. And that's our approach, is what's going on in your gut that could be creating the problems.
An amazing thing that has come to light with recent scientific studies is that approximately 85 to 90% of serotonin, our feel-good neurotransmitters, are produced in the gut. When you take an antidepressant, it's working with your serotonin levels. When the doctor tells you you have hormonal imbalance, this is what they're referring to. They are saying you're not producing enough serotonin. So the medical industry's solution is to create a drug which blocks the reabsorption of serotonin into the brain, called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. This allows more serotonin to be available for use. There are multiple problems with SSRIs, including possible liver damage, which could inhibit the body from being able to eliminate toxins. Another issue with SSRIs is that patients can develop a condition called tachyphylaxis, which is basically a word used to describe the body's resistance to antidepressants. So an antidepressant may work initially, and then over time, it will stop working. There are many hypotheses for why this is, but we don't have the exact scientific explanation at this point. The consequence of this is that depression and anxiety can resurface at any time, and the patient may have to keep going back and have their medication adjusted and be constantly shifting drug protocols. This is why a more holistic solution for anxiety and depression is so much better. If lifestyle changes and supplements can boost your serotonin production in the gut, then you don't need an inhibitor to keep it from being reabsorbed. Therefore, having a healthy gut is essential to maintaining a healthy mind. That's why diseases of the mind have a correlation with diseases of the gut. What you eat is affecting your mental health. You see, what you eat has a direct effect on your gut lining. Have you been enjoying this series? Have you learned something new? Has it helped to shift your perception? Has it given you hope? Have you even started feeling better with some of the things that you've been learning and implementing over the last few hours or a few days? It's my prayer the answer is yes to all of those. And if you've enjoyed this series, then I encourage you to take the step to own this series and keep it with you, with your family, with your friends in your own possession, so you can have it for times when you'll need it the most. By supporting this mission, you're able to support yourself, but you're also helping us to continue to get a message into the world that is saving lives from depression, anxiety, and other mental issues and conditions, as well as neurodegenerative diseases. We are thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to be making this change, but we can't do it without you. We simply can't. We're not like Big Pharma. We don't have huge pockets. So if you've enjoyed this series, if it's touched your life, take action today on owning the series for your sake and for ours also, so we can continue. I appreciate you for your consideration. By owning this series, you'll be able to rewatch episodes, perhaps watch an episode that you might have missed. You'll be able to watch the whole series again and share it with your friends and family and pass the copy of the DVDs or the transcript booklet around with family and friends. You'll also be able to join us live with question and answer calls with our doctors in the depression, anxiety, plus neurodegenerative recovery protocol. It's a fantastic live time module course that allows you to go through an experience with us to learn and develop your understandings and apply the things real time to get a real lasting transformation and get the support that you need. We've given this all away free as part of what you receive when you take action and own this series today. So it's my hope, my prayer, and encouragement for you to take action today, knowing that you're fully covered with a money-back guarantee, and we're just here for you to support you in your journey. And my wife and I will continue to create resources that touch and change lives and support you in your healing journey. Thank you so much for your consideration. Enjoy this episode.
It's interesting because you ask the question as far as how is the gut and the brain potentially related, and actually they are very closely related. In fact, there are nerve connections that go directly between the brain, especially the emotional part of the brain, and the gut, and that's why you get that gut feeling, right? And what's very interesting is there's more information that's being transmitted from your gut to your brain than the other way around. So our guts do talk to us. And so what that means is, even on a subconscious level, depending on what we ingest in our food and how we're digesting, and even the microbiome, in other words, the bacteria that reside in our gut, all of those things are going to influence how our gut is talking to our brain, whether it's sending us happy signals or whether it's sending us distress signals, which can then in turn trigger things like anxiety and irritability and dysphoria or depression.
The important thing to understand about this is your brain, okay, where 80% of your central nervous system is between your ears, okay? It's in your brain. 80% of your central nervous system in your brain only produces about 12%, 10 to 12% of the necessary dopamine and serotonin that your nervous system requires. Okay? Your spinal cord produces some, but about 85% of the dopamine created and manufactured in our body is manufactured in our gut. Okay, you have 100 billion neurons in your brain. Okay, you have 200 billion neurons in your gut. Okay, and so if the gut isn't healthy, if there's leaky gut, if there's IBS, if there's SIBO, if there's acid reflux, if there's constipation, if there's diarrhea, if there's, you name it, all the gallbladder issues. Okay, there's all of these different things are going to disrupt your body's capacity to produce dopamine and serotonin, okay? So if it doesn't produce dopamine correctly, you lose your drive to really do much, okay? if it's faulty, so so it's hit and miss. Okay, sometimes it produces, sometimes it doesn't. You'll almost have that manic depressive. So you be manic when you have too much dopamine, and then when that runs out, your supply's gone. You drop down below normal, and you're depressed. So that can be a factor. And the other thing, there's eating disorders are connected to dopamine, because dopamine not only is our driving force to survive hormone, it's our satisfaction hormone. Okay, so if the only way we can get some satisfaction is by eating, we become addicted to food. Okay, and we have to find other ways to get satisfaction. We got to heal our gut so it's producing enough dopamine. Then we have in the gut, if we're not producing serotonin. Well, serotonin is what makes us happy. And so if the gut is all these gut factors, diarrhea, constipation, irritable bowel, leaky gut, SIBO, gallbladder issues, Crohn's, all of these different gut disorders, right, directly affect both the quantity and the quality of serotonin that's produced in our gut. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so think about this. You can something that happens is if our body has a dysfunctional environment in it. Okay, a dysfunctional environment would be a swollen, inflamed environment. Okay, a body that's swollen, inflamed, is going to be highly reactive. The immune system's going to be on alarm at all times. But the tissue in all of our organs, okay, in someone that's severely inflamed, the tissue in their body is going to be a rough place for things to survive properly. Okay, so things like hormones in a swollen, inflamed person can be denatured in the environment of their body. Okay, so the thyroid produces all the right hormones, correct? But as they're floating around through the bloodstream and going off into the tissues, the environment's so bad, it denatures that hormone, and it doesn't work right. So when they get a lab test, they have all the thyroid hormones they ever wanted. Everything's normal, right? But they have every symptom you can imagine of an underactive thyroid. Okay, same thing happens with dopamine and serotonin. They're hormones also. They're hormone neurotransmitters. And so even if your brain is producing enough and so on and so forth, if you have a body that's inflamed, what's produced in the gut gets denatured by the time it gets to your brain. So the gut irritation feeds inflammation in our body. And so it's something that we have to deal with anyways. If we're going to ever get ahead of inflammation in our body, we got to heal the gut to begin with. And if we want enough serotonin and dopamine, we have to heal our gut.
I've been talking about leaky gut for 15 years, and it now finally seems like the 100th monkey has been reached. Thank goodness. Because leaky gut is a very real problem. And when you have leaky gut, we think about our digestive system and elimination system. We think about it being part of our bodies. And it is and it isn't. It's kind of like the plumbing in our house. When you go to use the bathroom and you do your business and you flush the toilet, you don't want to see it again, right? It goes through the pipes, it exits, and it goes somewhere, wherever it goes. We don't, want to talk about that. But it leaves the house and it's gone. Same thing with the plumbing, our digestive system in our bodies. We eat, I'm sure you eat nutritious, healthy food. It goes down the esophagus, goes to the stomach, goes in the small intestine. The good stuff is absorbed. You get the nutrients out of it, and the toxins and the waste products are voided out, and we never see it again. That's how it's supposed to be. But when you get a thing called leaky gut, what happens is this plumbing gets little gaps in between the cells. Now, You may not know this, but your stomach lining is one cell deep. It's very thin. And things that can cause leaky gut and cause gaps in the cells, these little patches here. Think about a hose that you're squirting your flowers with the water. And if you were to take an ice pick and start going through up and down the hose and making puncture things in here, the water starts to spew out, okay? That's what we see, if you can get a visual of that, with leaky gut. So now this food that's supposed to be digested and come into the small intestine and into the large intestine, the good nutritious part of that is supposed to be reabsorbed and the bad stuff is supposed to go out. When you have leaky gut, though, you're literally mixing poop with your bloodstream. Sounds kind of gross. It is kind of gross. And this sets up this incredibly toxic environment that triggers reactions from the body. Because normally, when you're digesting your food, your body knows what to do with this food stuff that's been broken down in these little bitty particles, and it goes through the pipes, But if you've got leaky gut, some of this food stuff leaks across and gets into the body, some of this waste material. And the body overreacts. It releases bradykinins, histamines, leukotrienes, these inflammatory chemicals that set up these allergic reactions. Now, leaky gut and allergic reactions are the great masqueraders. They can basically cause just about anything, whether that's anxiety, depression, pain. They can cause fatigue. They can cause irritable bowel syndrome. They can cause all sorts of havoc in the body. One of the things that we see that impacts anxiety is elevated histamine levels. And we know that folks that have elevated histamine levels, they have a tendency to be more anxious. So if you've got leaky gut and your body's generating histamine as an allergic reaction, that sets up this whole cascade of biochemical reactions that can trigger anxiety. It can make you more susceptible to that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, this chemical imbalance, because when I was younger, I was actually diagnosed with ADD and went to a psychologist, and then they referred me to a psychiatrist, and they gave me, mood-altering medication, and I remember just absolutely hating it. But that's all they ever talked about is, this is helping to balance the chemicals in your body. And for whatever reason, it just never really jived with me that that's what it is, right? Like it's a chemical imbalance in the body. And it's like, well, how does taking a synthetic chemical supposed to balance our chemicals? Like we have 100,000 chemical reactions happening every second in our body, and we're supposed to be like outsmarting it. I feel like our body's the greatest pharmacist on the world, in that aspect. So I'm not really sure what the right answer is. Is it actually a chemical imbalance or not? And in that aspect, I always like to look at the fact of like, what can you do to feel better? What can you do to heal? And the digestive tract, just like you mentioned, Jonathan, so important. Heal the gut, you can heal the brain. If you have a leaky gut or intestinal permeability issues in your gut, you're going to have a leaky brain. And those are just asking for, health issues. So really focusing on the gut, which is a foundation of healing autoimmune conditions and autoimmune disorders. And it's also a foundation, too, to have a healthy brain and also a healthy foundation for happiness, joy, right? Having these emotions that we should exhibit daily, being grateful and just love versus the, fear and loneliness and depression and these other, quote unquote emotions.
So the question that comes up is, what is causing so many gut issues in America and other Western countries? Why do so many people have chronic digestive problems? As a society, we're being exposed to things that we have never before encountered. Well, we can look at agriculture and find at least part of the answer. With an incredible increase in herbicides and pesticides over the last 80 years or so, chronic disease rates have escalated as well. So while we're living longer with modern healthcare interventions and sanitation regulations, we're also living with more chronic illnesses than ever before. Also, with the introduction of genetically modified organisms in 1994, we entered into a whole unexplored frontier. Since the longest feeding safety studies conducted by companies that create GMOs are 90-day toxicology studies, we're limited in our knowledge of the long-term effects of GMOs and their potential to create birth defects and gut-related illness. We know that pesticides and herbicides play a role, but could GMOs be causing leaky gut? Could they be affecting the gut lining? Two ominous statements were actually made by GMO advocates Amanda Lang and Kevin O'Leary on their Canadian Business News television series. When the pair had 14-year-old teen activist Rachel Parent on the show, she was discussing the need for long-term safety studies, and O'Leary countered by saying, "We're in a long-term study. You're eating genetically modified foods whether you like it or not." To which his co-host Amanda Lang added, "We're the lab rats." While these hosts didn't seem to see the glaring atrocity of their statements, it is clearly a dangerous endeavor to make the public the guinea pigs for health safety studies, especially when we do not even have transparent labeling concerning GMOs. In fact, the United States Senate has repeatedly decided against GMO labeling here in America. Why? This makes sense with what we've learned about the correlation between the food industry and government agencies that are supposed to be in place to protect our health. The real question for GMO producers is, what are they afraid of? If GMOs are safe, as they claim, and they stand behind their products, why do they feel the need to hide the fact that these products are in our foods? Why not have transparency and clear GMO labeling policies? Again, much like pharmaceuticals, GMOs have to alter the plants at a molecular level in order to receive a patent. These patents allow GMO companies to sue anyone who is in possession of their patented seed, even if the seed was carried by means of wind or surface water and cross-contaminated with another field. The owner of that field may not know that his crop has been contaminated with a patented seed. Yet, if it's been discovered that this has happened, GMO companies have been known to bring lawsuits and fees against their farmers. This allows big agriculture GMO businesses to create a near monopoly on certain crops, such as soy and corn. Again, we find ourselves somewhat at the mercy of a corrupt and greedy system. So we need to learn what choices we can make in order to combat the possible damage being done to our health by corporate America. We want to heal our guts and our minds. So let's seek to understand more about the science behind this. Dr. Newsom, my big question is, with our guts being so torn up to create such epidemic levels of depression, anxiety, and other mental diseases, illnesses, essentially, what have we done to destroy our health so badly? Our guts and our minds so badly.
Have you ever sprayed Roundup on a dandelion?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen someone, dandelions after they sprayed eating a food that has Roundup in it does to your gut what Roundup does to a dandelion. If that gives you an idea. Okay, so imagine the inside of your gut, all nice and healthy. You got little fingers, they're called villi, on the inside of your gut. You consume food with a glyphosate with Roundup in it, okay? That glyphosate goes in and just shrivels up dries those villi right out. Okay, immediately as that happens, guess what you have?
Right.
Leaky gut. Okay, because those villi are where you're supposed to absorb all your nutrients. Okay, the moment they shrivel up, now you got this one big spot where you start absorbing things, and so instead of having a really tight knit membrane that only allows little things, very small and minute things to get through, you've wore that membrane off, and now you have this membrane that it isn't sifting, it's just kind of a membrane that's keeping stuff in and letting more stuff come in, so your innards don't seep out through your gut. Okay. And so there's one. And so what foods would that have? GMO foods. If you're eating GMO, the reason they genetically modify it is it's so they can use these types of herbicides on them. Okay? They genetically modify the food so they can use these herbicides on the soil around the plant that they're growing, and it doesn't kill the plant. Okay? So when we eat those things, it causes this shriveling of our gut inside. Okay? That's one.
Now, what are the genetically modified foods that are on the market?
Your primary are soy, corn, things, papayas. Non-organic papayas are almost always genetically modified. They even have different types of meats, crab meats, and there's genetically modified salmon on the market. There's genetically modified potatoes, tomatoes, and almost quite a few of your nightshade, which are in most cultures, your nightshade families are tomatoes, peppers, potatoes. they're all staple foods. So from all these different cultures, those are the prime. They're staple foods. They're things that you have. People have their meat and potatoes. Or they have mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. Okay, or they have you get into Hispanic culture. What Hispanic doesn't eat tomatoes or peppers?
What about wheat?
Wheat. There we go. Wheat's another one.
Is it? Because people say that it's not.
Here's what they do with wheat. This is the practice. Okay, they plant wheat. Okay, and to speed up harvest and make it easier to harvest, they'll spray it 2 or 3 times with glyphosate to dry up the wheat, which makes it easier for them to cut it and harvest it. Okay, it kills the wheat, it kills the plant. Okay, this is non-GMO wheat. Okay, they'll spray it with glyphosate to dry it out so it's easy to harvest. Okay, so then if you're eating non-GMO wheat and you got irritable bowel, you got all these gut issues anytime you eat wheat, was it the wheat or was it the glyphosate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So besides the antibiotics, now we've got pesticides. These pesticides are proven to kill bacteria. That's what they do. They kill fungus, they kill bacteria in your body. So they go in and they wipe out good gut bacteria as well. We'll see there's been a rise in all kinds of diseases in the 20th century just from chlorine. Chlorine wiped out a lot of diseases, but it created new diseases because chlorine also kills bacteria. Drinking chlorine all the time, breathing it in your showers, that also affects the bacteria in your body. Then you see pesticides, and then you've got the GMOs that are proven to actually, those foods have pesticides in them. They have Roundup in it, which will kill good bacteria, but it also has the effect, and they've seen this in scans, of opening the intestines up so that you get leaky gut syndrome. So your undigested food comes in because you haven't fully digested it and just leaks into your bloodstream. Once it's into your bloodstream, because it's not fully digested, your body thinks it's an invader and triggers an autoimmune response. And so what we see now is this huge increase in autoimmune diseases in the last century, just gone up off the chart. Certainly people often think, we're so much healthier now. That's nonsense. People who lived on farms and didn't have exposure to all of the germs of living in a city have lived from 80 to 100 years healthy at 100. This was common in the old days where people didn't live in cities. But once you lived in cities, you have all the toxicity of people living together and the feces and the urine and all that, and germs. And so you get the imbalance. But today, the drugs we take, the side effects of drugs, every single drug you take over the counter or prescribed is going to kill some good bacteria in your gut. It's also going to damage your liver. These are the side effects of taking drugs. Look at the long list of them, even the over-the-counter stuff. So we're inundating ourselves with things that are interfering with healthy gut.
Apart from that, we have chemical things that are going on in the body that will produce both anxiety and depression. One of the most common things is, today people's digestion is just a mess. I'll give you an example. They take the sausage industry in the United States. Okay, we don't use, pig intestine would be what you normally use for sausage, correct? Okay, your pigs here in the United States, they can't use the intestinal material from pigs in the United States to make sausage. A reason being is the GMO food that the GMO soy and GMO corn that they're feeding pigs in feedlots are causing such a thinning in their intestines. Their intestines are literally thinning, so the amount of cells deep there are thick that their intestines would normally be is reducing and reducing and reducing. And they can't pack anything into those intestines. They just burst open. Also, pigs, a large amount of pigs in feedlots being fed GMO corn, GMO soy, have to be slaughtered before their intestines rupture and they bleed out. Okay, so I'm telling you this because if you're eating the standard American diet, you're eating GMO soy, and you're getting GMO corn. It's in the food, just in regular food. If it's doing that to pigs, guess what it's doing to you? Okay, that is damaging your digestive system and causing the intestinal wall to thin. Now, as that happens, it's easier and easier to develop what we call leaky gut. And leaky gut is where the intestinal wall gets inflamed and it swells up and the tissues separate and they become more permeable. So instead of being tightly knit like this and only small things can get through, they swell up and bigger particles can float through the gut. That's what we call leaky gut, okay? Leaky gut leads to autoimmune disorders. It leads to immunodeficiency. It leads to food allergies. It leads to environmental allergies. It leads to chemical sensitivities. There's anything inflammatory. Okay, leaky gut will lead to inflammation in your body. Period. So with the digestive tract being tore up and irritated the way it is, we got to remember that 85% of the serotonin and the dopamine that your body produces is produced in your gut. Okay? If the gut is not healthy, an impairment in the production of those two hormones occurs. Okay, so those two hormones, their production gets messed up, and not only their production, but the consistency of the production of those hormones gets messed up, quote unquote, messed up, a real medical term here. But when that happens, you may get a surge of dopamine without enough serotonin, or you may get a surge of serotonin without enough dopamine, or you don't get enough of either, or you get too much of both happening because of the dysfunction in the gut.
So let's be clear, genetically modified organisms. So the grain companies, Monsanto, Archer Daniels Midland, these big companies are putting pesticides and chemicals genetically, putting them in the genes of the plants so that the intent is that bugs will eat them less or die when they eat them and not reproduce. The problem with that is we're a big bug. And so we eat that, and it's toxic to us too. And so we're taking poisons in our body. If you're eating GMO, if whatever you're buying doesn't say non-GMO in it, I'll virtually guarantee you that you're eating pesticides or chemicals that are designed to kill animals. Bugs are animals. And can I say it's not healthy for us? I mean, that would be a gross understatement. So when you consume a GMO, not only is it killing part of you, but it's killing off your gut biome, which is critical. You have to understand that we are parasites. The numbers vary, but it's about 10-to-1 ratio. So if there's 1 trillion of our cells, we have 10 trillion bacteria in our gut and on us. So we're actually a parasite off of their byproducts. So you want to have healthy bacteria. You take these GMO foods or you take an antibiotic and it kills off those beneficial bacteria that are making products that you need to live a healthy life. So that's where probiotics come in, trying to regenerate that. That's where I was talking about nicotinamide riboside, trying to regenerate the mitochondria, which for all intents and purposes are intracellular bacteria. So antibiotics are great if you have a life-threatening bacterial infection, but as physicians, we tend to just pass those out like candy. More of a pacifier a lot of times because, okay, this will just run its course, but mother brought kid in and she needs to be reinforced that she needs to come to the doctor and she wants to leave with something, so let's just write an antibiotic. And that's disastrous healthcare, and it has been devastating to us physically, to our gut biome, because then you don't get immunity. We clearly know that now. If we intervene with an antibiotic, your body doesn't create immunity to that bacteria, that virus. So these are not healthy things for us to be taking on a regular basis.
When we're talking about GMOs, we need to understand what they are. Some people think it means God move over, but GMO actually means genetically modified organism. And GMOs have been promoted as a solution to world hunger, that they would lead to more drought-resistant crops and bigger yields, that they would lead to better nutrition and flavor and less pesticide consumption. But in reality, they haven't accomplished any of those things. What the vast majority of the GMOs on the market today have done is one or both of two things. Number one, they are pesticide producers, which means they produce the insecticide Bt in every cell of the plant. So if certain bugs take a bite, their stomachs split open and they die. Number two is that they are herbicide resistant, which means you can spray them with Roundup or 2,4-D or certain other toxic herbicides, and they'll kill the weeds, but they won't kill the plant that we're growing. So now we are eating plants that are living pesticide factories. They produce pesticide in every cell of the plant. And we're eating plants that have been sprayed with herbicides. Now, Roundup is a probable carcinogen. The state of California declares that it is known to cause cancer. It's linked to a lot of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other cancer cases. And it's also an endocrine disruptor. And it's an antibiotic. Monsanto actually patented it as an antibiotic. So we know that it can impact gut bacteria. We are now eating large amounts of glyphosate. In the United States alone, we spray about 300 million pounds of it on our crops every year, about a pound for every American. And that's going directly on the food that we're eating. So what's the impact of all this glyphosate? Well, we don't exactly know, because we're all kind of like guinea pigs in an uncontrolled mass experiment. But we do know that since glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, has been being sprayed on our croplands, we've seen a dramatic rise in rates of depression, as well as autism and ADHD, and all sorts of other health problems that we're facing today. Now, we've also seen a big rise in the Chinese GDP and all kinds of other metrics. Correlation doesn't equal causation. But when you see a correlation this strong, and you recognize that there is a lot of data showing that this herbicide could be toxic to human beings, then you've got to wonder, is there a connection? And I, for one, want to steer clear of the foods that have been sprayed with glyphosate, because I don't want to eat that stuff. So how do you avoid it? If you want to steer clear of glyphosate and GMOs in general, go organic is the best way to go, because certified organic foods are non-GMO and are not sprayed with glyphosate. You can get foods that are certified non-GMO, and in the case of corn, soy, cotton, which is used for cottonseed oil, canola, and sugar, specifically sugar beets, you can, those are the crops that you want to particularly avoid if you're wanting to avoid GMOs. But glyphosate and Roundup are being used as a desiccant now on particularly the wheat harvest, but also barley and oats and a few other crops. Staple crops, cereal crops on a large scale, to dry out the crop before harvest. So with all of those crops, if you want to avoid glyphosate, you now have to go organic.
Another part of the puzzle of what may be causing the rising gut-related illnesses is the increased use of antibiotics. This problem goes beyond what is prescribed to people by their doctor, since farm animals are dosed with high levels of antibiotics from birth. The runoff from these farms, where these animals are often housed, often create contaminants in our water sources. So the water we drink may contain antibiotics without us even realizing it. So if we're eating meat and dairy and also consuming contaminated water, we are taking in antibiotics without even knowing it. So what's the harm in this? Don't antibiotics save lives? Well, the original discovery of antibiotics was groundbreaking, and it did help curb many infections that would have otherwise been known to kill people at the time. However, poor sanitation was also to blame, and simple sanitation laws have helped to quell many of these infections. While antibiotics may still have their place, the overuse of them has caused antibiotic-resistant bacteria, or superbugs, such as MRSA. However, the real issue is much deeper than this. recent scientific studies have begun to uncover the gut microbiome. There is a delicate balance of bacteria and other microbes in the gut that is beneficial and essential to human health. Many of these antibiotics, while eliminating the bad bacteria that is causing an infection, can also wipe out the good bacteria that is keeping your digestive system working properly and your immune system functioning at an optimal capacity. So, you can see how annihilating these beneficial microbes can be detrimental on your overall health. Balancing this important microbiome is essential for healthy serotonin production as well. In a study published in the scientific journal Cell in 2016, this correlation between the gut microbiota and serotonin production was firmly established. This is groundbreaking science that we did not have up until recently. Why isn't this being broadcast nationwide in a society that is rampant with depression and anxiety? In a society where mood-related disorders are on the rise and suicidal rates are increasing. Our society has become so reliant on conglomerate systems to tell us what is healthy for us, while these very same corporations are the ones seeking to make us sick and keep us that way for their own profit. So our goal here is to give you a better understanding of these things so you can take back control of your own health and your mental well-being.
Well, what basically happens is we've got a lot of things attacking us now. If you've done antibiotics, they've wiped out some of the good strains of probiotics in your gut. Literally, there's real estate in your gut. There's 7 pounds, 6, 7 pounds of microbiome of this bacteria in your gut. And there really is, to a certain extent, no bad bacteria. It's just that when we add antibiotics, you suddenly destroy parts of your microbiome, and the most hardy parts of the microbiome are often candida. So they're like the weeds in the garden. So you got the candida, the antibiotics that come in and knock out your plants and knock out the weeds, but the weeds grow back. They're like super. Then you've got antibiotics that go in and cause the gut dysbiosis. Every microbe, your gut is necessary for brain function. Brain function is necessary for nervous system function, immune function, and so forth. So it regulates. But what was discovered in 2017 is that for every microbe in the brain, there are 7 to 9 microbes necessary to make that. For every neuron in the brain, there's 7 or 9 microbes that circle around it to make it work. They work synergistically. We didn't know this before. We thought the brain was sterile. But no, the gut produces those microbes which are necessary for your brain to function efficiently. So the gut and the brain are so intimately related, and we're just wiping out our gut with the antibiotics, which sometimes can save lives, but we can then replenish ourselves with the wide spectrum of probiotics. If you take a lot of the probiotics you buy, say, oh, there's so many, but it's just of 3 strains. There's basically 3 strains in most of them. You want to get the broad spectrum one, 17, 26, 32, 42 is my favorite. That's the Bravo probiotics. That's what I make for my family.